Good morning, friends. Keith and I are back in the studio today, and we're going to talk about some history again. It's really interesting what was happening in the turn of the century, 1910 in that area, right before World War I.
That decade between 1910 and 1920, a lot of things were going on in Augusta and this area of Butler County.
And it was still kind of the Wild West then, right? I mean, where cars are new to the picture and horses are still prevalent.
Streets were dirt and, just the usual old time, what was common then, we don't even think of today.
I know, and some of the things you've told me are just, it's hard to imagine that's the way it was because you just couldn't picture it. But have you got any neat stories, particular to that?
Well, you've heard of common kids, and we did when we were kids anyway, talk about Dragon State Street.
Dragon Douglas.
Dragon Douglas in Wichita.
So is that like beating the bricks?
Well, that's what we called it then. Now, but in those days when they called dragging the streets, they were actually dragging, they hired somebody to drag the street with a big pipe or a timber to smooth it out because it's all dirt.
Oh.
And the streets were rough, they were ruddy, if it was wet, they were muddy, if it was dry, they were dusty. Hauling the heavy oil equipment around with wagons made big ruts. And when you got a car, they could hardly drive down the street without shaking themselves up so bad.
Right, oh yeah.
Hardly stay in the thing.
There'd be hoof prints and wagon tracks and...
Yeah, and so that's what in those days, that's called dragging the street. And they actually hired a guy to hook up a horse to a pipe or a log and drag it to smooth it out. Some of them, if it got bad, they'd use an old slip,
Well, that wasn't what I was thinking, because when I grew up, we would drag Douglas or beat the bricks here at Augusta, cruising around and talking with friends. And so that's where that terminology come from, was dragging the street.
Dragging the street. So there was a really interesting story. Going to go for dragging the streets. They hired this guy. The cars, they were so rough, and the city had passed an ordinance on these cars with speed limits and crazy speed limits, like 15 miles an hour. Had to be no more than 8 miles an hour if you went around the corner.
You couldn't go flying around the corner.
Business area and down State Street, they put a 55-gallon drum in the middle of each intersection. So if you wanted to take a left turn, you had to go all the way around the drum, all the way around the barrel to make your left turn. You just couldn't cut across. One of the other ordinances that had to do with early model cars and tied in with the rough streets, they had to have lights on the front and a red light on the back. Well, as you drive around these cars, the lights would get jiggly, and sometimes the lights would go out or fall off or whatever.
Yeah, and I suppose light bulbs weren't that reliable yet.
Probably not. And the wiring system wasn't the greatest in the world.
Yeah.
So they passed a city ordinance that you had to have these lights. So they hired they had a marshal, police chief, marshal, named Crow. And he had 2 or 3 policemen. Well, the fine for not having a tail light was $16.85.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Well, the patrolman that arrested the guy got $6.85. It was a good wage in those days, and the rest of them went to the city.
So they had significant reason to give you a ticket.
They were very diligent about watching for taillights.
I bet. Wow.
So one night they were patrolling the streets, walking along the sidewalks, and here come a guy by the name of Peel, was his last name, prominent Augustan, riding his horse downtown. Well, which wasn't unusual, except he was hanging on to a long pole with one hand, and on the end of the pole was a red lantern. He had a lantern with a red globe in it. That was his tail light.
On his horse or his car?
On his horse. He's holding a pole, long pole with this red lantern hanging on the end of it. Well, the people along the sidewalks just started clapping and laughing, and they were giving the patrolman a bad time and haw-hawing him and jeering him and everything. And so this Marshal Crow, he told the guys to arrest that guy and put him in jail. So they took him to the jailhouse.
Oh my gosh.
So the jailhouse at the time was right over here, about where the city building is now, kind of on the alley. There's a little brick building. So he was in there, 2 or 3 other guys. So the people just raised Cain, and so they wouldn't disperse, and so he gets up on the car, fires his gun, a couple shots over their head. Told them to get out of there, just break it up, and they didn't do it. Well, about that time, somebody threw a stick at him, hit him in the head, knocked him off the car, knocked him out. 3 guys, they jumped on him, started beating him and kicking him and ran
The
him.
police chief?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
His assistant.
Oh, his deputy. Yeah.
And so somebody else jumped in and they drug the policeman off and got him out of the way. Well, the crowd wouldn't disperse by then. There's 500 or 600.
Oh my
And
gosh,
so
it's a full-blown riot.
Oh yeah, it was a regular riot. So somebody said, well, we just need to go over there and tear that calaboose down. That's what they call the jail.
The jailhouse.
So they gathered up some sledgehammers and some crowbars, and they proceeded to go over there. And
Time for a jailbreak.
break the door down and break the people out, and the policemen were nowhere to be seen. They all went into hiding.
I bet I would have too if they'd not get people dead with sticks and beating them up.
So they decided, well, we're going to go to the mayor's house. Well, he just lived about a block away, so they go to the mayor's house. Well, fortunately, he wasn't home. I can't even remember. And so they finally dispersed and went on their way. But the next day, Topeka got word, and they sent an officer down from the capital, from Topeka, to make sure things didn't get any more out of hand.
Wow.
And things kind of cooled down, and after he came down, and it was okay. The rough roads and the old cars created the problem with the lights, and that's how dragging the streets got started, and that's what happened to the tearing down the jailhouse.
Well, it sounds like they were kind of getting roughed up by the police, you know, and getting...
They were getting ticked off about it, I'm sure, because the policemen were pocketing a good wage for picking on them.
So did they get Peel out of the cahoose?
Yeah, he got out, and he became a Butler County treasurer.
Oh, really?
Eventually.
I'll be darned. So Augusta was pretty rough back then. We don't see anything like that now. Everybody just...
They had already voted to pave the streets. They had already voted to build a city building. So right after this, about a month later, they started bricking State Street from 2nd all the way to High, up to the top of the hill. And of course, then people on the side streets, Broadway and some of those other streets.
I didn't know that. I thought the bricks were laid during the Works Progress Administration, WPA.
This was in 1916 when it started.
Oh, me darn.
They built the city building in late 1916, $15,000 to build the city building.
And, you know, we had, with all the oil we had in the area and south around Brownstown and down that way, Augusta really come to prominence and become fairly wealthy in a hurry because of World War I, and we needed that oil for the war effort.
The first oil well came in on the Frank Varner property down southwest of town. It was flowing at 150 barrels a day, which doesn't sound like a lot. 35 cents a barrel, that was a lot of money in those days.
Right.
Well, then about a year later, second or third well came in, and it was flowing 2,500 barrels a day.
Whew.
By then, the war effort was on, and the price of oil had gone up to over $1. And there was 1 or 2 farmers down there said, I don't want that stinking stuff on my property. I don't want them driving all over everything, tearing up the fields. Well, one of the guys that had oil went to show his neighbor who didn't want oil his royalty check of $9,000.
Oh, my
That
gosh.
changed his mind right quick. He said, drill it wherever you want.
Right, yeah. $9,000, you could buy half the county in 1910, 1916.
It was 1915 when that oil first came in now. Then they ran a railroad spur down to haul it out with trains. Then they laid pipelines down in there, and that's how it all got started.
We're going to have to talk about that later, and I know we've been down there and toured that country, and it's just, you don't see it now unless you know where to look, but there's still a lot of infrastructure from those times down there. But that's really interesting that the whole city come out for a nice jailbreak and broke out a prominent citizen. Whatever happened to the police officer? Did he keep his job?
They never showed up again. They were gone.
Oh, they hit the road.
They hit the road, all of them.
Well, I guess that's what a good beating will do. You just decide you're not wanted. We're out of here. That is crazy. That's a crazy story. Well, there's a little bit of history for Augusta for you, you know. It's a great town. It always has been, and it's not always been as quiet and peaceful as it is now. Anyway, we enjoy talking about this stuff, and we want you to know more about the history of your town as well. If you're looking for a great place to live, looking for peace and quiet, place to raise children. It's a family town. This is a place you need to come and look. Look at Augusta and go down to the historical museum and look it over. They have a book here. Keith will tell you about it.
This is a book written by Burl Allison Jr. It covered Augusta from 1868 to 1990, and it's got a lot of these stories in it. If you have any reason to want to know more about Augusta, this is very interesting.
And we're going to do more of these videos because a lot of this history that happened back then we don't know about. If you're aware of it when you're taking the kids to school in the morning and stuff, you will recognize it as you drive by it because a lot of the history is still there. There's one topic I'll talk about later that I want to get into, and that's when they moved all the houses from Brownstown to Augusta.
I want to make one other promotion for the museum. We're having what we call our cemetery tour next month, October 29th on Saturday night. And we tour, probably 7 or 8 graves of early prominent Augustans. And we'll have reenactors at each gravesite to tell you the story about that individual, how they got there, where they came from, what they did when they moved here and all that. And they have always have some really good ones. And it's very interesting. It takes about 30, 45 minutes to walk through the cemetery with a guide and listen to a reenactor at each gravesite.
While we're putting in sales pitches, and we probably ought to do this again on our next story, but the pie auction's coming up.
Yes, the chili feed and pie auction for the benefit of the museum, the restoration of the cabin, is coming up in November. I don't remember the exact date, but it's about a week or so before Thanksgiving. And we have all the chili you can eat, cinnamon rolls, and then after everybody's done eating, we have a pie auction. The people in the community bake these nice, beautiful pies, and we auction them off. It's a great fundraiser, good time, good evening. Mark will be doing the auctioning of the pies. It's a lot of fun.
It's not a long event. You come in, you visit, have chili. Usually Miss Butler County's there and some different dignitaries, and everybody just has a good time. And then I sell a lot of pies. And they're the good ones. They're the homemade ones that people have put their heart into. We just wanted to tell you that neat story, and we will have more coming up. While we were sitting here, a couple crossed my mind that I want to talk about. Anyway, we want you to keep an eye on us and listen to our stories if you wouldn't mind. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Watch us on Facebook. And as always, we want you to have a blessed day.